currently doing an offensive in Avdiivka and gaining speed, and Ukraine is preparing for offensives in Kherson and Bakhmut. Let's get into today's video. First, let's move to Kherson, to Krinky, where there have been actually reports, pro-Russian bloggers reporting that the Ukrainians have managed to advance and capture some of these fields over here. However, we did get drone footage from the Ukrainians bombing Russians over here, so this is most likely under Russian control. This map is not 100% accurate on the situation going on during Krinky. Also, there are reports of Ukrainians building up forces around here to launch some type of attack here. There are also reports going around in the pro-Russian space of 4,000 Ukrainians that are currently being trained or have been trained by Western nations that will start an offensive into Kherson to basically most likely to gain a bigger foothold than the foothold they have in Krinky in early December and January. So that's Ukraine's offensive into Kherson. Now moving on to Robotyne, the lines have been static. There have been attacks and the Russians have been droning and destroying Ukrainian vehicles. However, I'm not going to show that content because of the violence in it. However, the Ukrainians have not moved. The Russians have not moved. It seems like this place is completely stabilized. Now moving on to Avdiivka, the first thing I want to talk about is this area over here. The Russians seem to have recaptured this area. It was going in the gray zone a lot. The Ukrainians had it, the Russians had it, and there was a machine gun nest that was very difficult for the Russians to capture. And the Russians, according to them, lost a ton of men because of this. However, when the Russians did manage to capture the place, they used a lot of drones against it. And when they did manage to capture the place, they found out that this machine gun was a basically robot machine gun. It was controlled by an iPad that the Ukrainians were using, and they could control it from anywhere in Avdiivka and even further. And all they would have to do, because the machine gun had a camera, is just aim at the Russians they wanted to kill and kill them without the risk of machine gunners, the people that reload the machine guns for the machine gunners getting killed or captured. Also over here, bunch of Russian tanks and BTRs all driving around this area, which basically means that this area is most likely clear. Even the place in the blue zone is most likely any major threats to the Russian military vehicles, such as tanks, because the Russians are driving a bunch of tanks and there was no destruction, no shelling, or nothing like that. So we may get a video from the Ukrainian side of their side of the story. However, we have not gotten that yet, and it seems like the Ukrainians are about to lose this area near Avdiivka very soon. Now, Stopove, I did not report on this because I was a bit inactive. However, the Russians did manage to enter Stopove. People are saying the Russians captured Stopove. However, 2 days ago, we saw footage of Ukrainian Bradley over here, and it was basically the Ukrainian counterattack. So I'm not going to say Stopove is under Ukrainian control, but it's not under Russian control. It's currently in the gray zone. The Russians have also advanced on the 17th, the 15th, and they've just been advancing. The Russians have paused this advancement over here on the north because of a surprise Ukrainian attack over here. Now, this front line has not changed since 2014, and the Ukrainians suddenly do some massive offensive, not with manpower, but the land they took was alarming enough for the Russians that they decided to pause the northern attack on Avdiivka. And it was basically, this area is basically, Bakhmut is right here, and Avdiivka is right here. So the Russians, as you guys know, and as this red shows, the Russians have made severe gains near Bakhmut, and actually, according to a lot of people, and I do believe this, they did manage to capture Avdiivka. So basically, the Russians had to either pull reserves from Bakhmut or Avdiivka, and they basically decided that Avdiivka was more important than their offensive in Bakhmut, so they decided to pull forces from there to stabilize this attack. So far, the Ukrainians, there has been no video photo confirmation of the Ukrainians gaining any more land, so they could have stabilized it. Most likely they did. And now the Ukrainians are using this opportunity that the Russians don't have a lot of men here. We have videos of drones attacking a bunch of Russian soldiers because the Russian soldiers were ready for this offensive, but then the Ukrainians did the offensive in this area, so the Russians had to pause this offensive. So the Ukrainian drones took advantage of it. A lot of casualties on the Russian side. I'm not going to show you the video because of the violence against humans. And some people are saying, which I personally don't believe, that the Russians may have to abandon this whole entire front and move over here. I personally don't believe this is going to happen. I think that the Russians are not going to abandon even any place. If they were to abandon a place, they would probably move beyond the railroads, but I don't believe that the Russians are going to have to abandon these whole entire fields right here. So basically, that is all what's happening. Nothing really going on in Kupiansk. Obviously, we got drone footage and artillery footage, but I'm not going to show you guys that again because YouTube would frown on that type of content. So that's basically what's going on in Ukraine. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, join the Fact Homie,